Thank you, Bob. My name is Doug Dobson. I have the honor of directing the Lou Fry Institute at University of Central Florida. I'm happy to be here today with my colleagues, Marissa Hightower, who is the Associate Director for the Office of Civic and Community Engagement at the University of Miami. My friend and colleague, Joe Smiley, who is Dean of the Social and Behavioral Sciences at St. Petersburg College. Dr. Smiley has been in that position for about a decade?
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, about a decade. So thank you for being with me. This is indeed not a response panel. What Bob originally asked us to do, we'll try to do, and that is to follow the last panel, which was kind of a 20,000-foot view of what's going on in civic education here in the state. We thought we'd get down on the ground and talk to you a little bit about what's going on in our programs and what we're seeing from the level of the field. And we thought we'd start with Marissa. So
Great.
You're on.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Marissa Hightower. I'm the Associate Director. Thank you for the introduction. So, without further ado, I just need to sort of push UM and undefeated. I can't help it. But aside from that, our office started in 2011, where the mission of our office is to enhance university community collaborations by engaging the university's academic resources to enrich civic and community life in our local, national, and global communities. Basically, we're taking teaching and research and to enhance our emerging leaders. And I use that term to not only cover our students, but also, as you saw in our video earlier, community scholars and affordable housing, to think civically and democratically. And as Earl put it, adding these valuable skills and developing these leadership skills not only helps our community, but it gives an inherently satisfying feeling. There's sort of a psychosocial well-being that comes from doing community work. As your group has focused on, our civic health in Florida, especially Florida millennials, is quite low. The Florida millennials are the less engaged millennials of all their age group, and then more so in Florida. Thank you. So I might have had a little too much coffee. So as we start to think about how to address our civic health in terms of higher education, we look at different ways in which we use educational programs to go beyond the classroom and to create emerging leaders in our community, as well as bring forth how to address immediate needs by having the students take what they do in the classroom and then bringing it out.
So do you have a clicker?
Yes, you
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. Good.
So what our purpose is to create an engaged university, which, as you can see from the infographic above, is to have this sort of Venn diagram of fostering interdisciplinarity, encouraging collaboration, promoting diversity, shaping knowledge, enhancing community, and educating for citizenship. And out of the benefits for engaged learning is not only a psychosocial well-being that I mentioned earlier, but it enhances personal development, enhances student learning, fosters professional development and career exploration, and it meets community needs, not only on the local level, but national and global. It fosters civic responsibility, develops awareness of community issues, and the students gain exposures to connecting to new populations and settings. A lot of the demographic for our university is not only national, but also international, and a lot of them come into the Miami area not aware fully of many of the issues that our city faces, more in terms of high economic growth with a very low wage gap that exists. So we want to help them understand the community with which they live in, and for them to understand that the university is not a silo, but we're an anchor institution to make a difference. So how do we do that? we offer academic service learning courses. Currently, we offer over 600 academic service learning courses in our curriculum, and it answers to the fact that this crosses all fields, from public health to STEM sciences to humanities. It is rooted in and intrinsically linked to teaching and research, and it's problem-oriented. It's experiential learning on a community level. It's linking the classroom and the community through hands-on education, and it's transformative. So part of that is having faculty members who are able to incorporate academic service learning into the classroom. Since our inception, we've created a program called the Engaged Faculty Fellows, where 6 faculty members receive a $2,500 summer stipend and spend the next academic year in 6 separate workshops developing their courses to have a community component involved in it. They create their own cohort to talk about the means in which and how to develop reflection throughout it, how to identify community partners, how to make the experience meaningful, to touch upon some examples that we have that extend into the STEM sciences as well. Last year, we had a faculty fellow who was in the College of Engineering, and she, in her 101 course, wanted to teach with a component and had bought these little boxes of how to test the air quality in the dorms. And then from there, what do you do if you find out the air quality in the dorms is not substantial? And took them through the next steps, which involved getting involved with their facilities and real estate planning, and it ended up in developing better clean filters for the dorms. So there was a change. It was a small change, but it was a change that came from this. We have also an English course on advanced composition, the literature of incarceration, where Professor Joshua Schriftman works with Exchange for Change. And this is a program that works with those who are incarcerated to help them write letters, how to develop their composition skills. The students are working with those who are incarcerated, both at Chrome Detention, but also at the Miami-Dade Correctional. And it helps them understand the issues of incarceration and social justice while exchanging letters with these writing partners throughout an entire semester. In addition, now that we've covered the faculty component, we also have for our students a few programs that exist. One is a longevity program called the Civic Scholars Program, and this is in partnership with our Butler Center for Service and Learning. And this program is for students who usually in their freshman or sophomore year come in and they take 4 academic service learning courses equivalent to 12 credits. They take 3 co-curricular course, leadership and development through the Butler Center. And they develop a capstone project that builds capacity within a community. And they identify a community partner. They develop a capstone and try to implement. One example is a student worked with a local hospital to develop a community well-being garden so that those receiving treatments had an area to walk out to. Just walking out, seeing a garden where there are many different kinds of plants, healing plants that might be available, getting them out of the hospital room seemed to help their well-being, which studies I've heard, I cannot quote exactly, have found that bringing people out while they're healing or helping their well-being will, in fact, help their health at the end. So through the Civic Scholars Program, the students enroll in a reflection seminar during their final semester where they do a presentation of learning and they compile everything that they've learned, all the reflections, and what they take forth from it. And I must say that a lot of these students are incredibly, we were talking earlier about these students who are so highly involved in everything, and I have encountered students with 3 to 4 different majors, multiple minors, highly engaged in every single student organization, but still have this idea of how to better those around them and want to do anything and everything possible. We have a Newman Civic Fellow Scholar who is coming to the gala next week for Florida Campus Compact. And she is not only making the time to come, but then flying out the next day from Miami to go to the national Newman Fellow, and she said, I just want to give back to those who have done so much for me, because when I was younger, everyone else helped me out. So I was really impressed by it, that this is something that started from the ground up, and she's willing to work back and give back. If you have further information about the different programs we have, and this was just a touch of what some of the things that we've done, you may contact us. We also work a lot around affordable housing. The Community Scholars in Affordable Housing works around those issues in which the capstones are presented, and a lot of the times end up in some of the legislation. So we're making an impact there, but we're also doing a number of other programs as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean Smiley?
Good afternoon to you, my colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here, to be with you today. Bob, very special blessings upon you. Thank you for the invitation. I don't take it lightly for such an important topic as this, because I happen to believe that our democracy is at stake. And so then I come briefly, on the 10 minutes that I have today, is to say, first of all, I come with a positive attitude, quite frankly. Even now, I'm convinced that we're in the process of improving, even with the kinds of things that are happening with our legislature. And I come today then that I may be able to discuss one way that I see that it can be one of those things that can move forward in a very positive way. I fundamentally believe that community colleges can be a powerful force in helping us to move forward with this particular notion about the importance of civic engagement. Here's a point that we make that you shouldn't have to convince anybody about. Number one, this notion of civic engagement as an educational endeavor is very, very important. There's no question about that. But we can say this. Why is that the case? Why is it that we can say that it's an endeavor that is a very effective endeavor? Well, number one, there is no question that civic engagement, especially at the community college level, it increases student retention, period. We know that to be the case. We don't need any more data on that. We know that it has an impact on retention. Secondly, we also know that if it's done right, it has an impact on student success. There's no question about that. Who in their right mind involved in education would not be moved by the fact that an action or an event or an activity would have an impact, a positive impact, on student retention and student success? So this notion of its impact on that is vitally important. I don't think we can make light of the fact that it prepares students for their responsibility as citizens when they're engaging in this at the community college level. And that would be number two. And then I don't want to make light of the fact that if it is in fact done right, these students are having a positive impact on the communities in which they're operating. They're having a positive impact in those communities where they're effective. They're doing what we're asking them to do. So positive impact on them in terms of students. They're being retained. They're being successful. Secondly, in this particular case, positive impact on the community. There's no question about that. And indeed, a positive impact on them as preparing them for the role of being a citizen in this great country. And so then having said that, then we say this. Every county, there's 67 of them in this state, every county is connected in some way with a community college. A community college, somehow or the other, is involved in every county. That county claims that that particular community college is the one that serves as a service provider as a community college. I'm from Pinellas County, but of the other 28 community colleges, they're serving a county somewhere. So every county is in fact served by a community college. And so we say it impacts student success. There's no question about it. We have found that to be true. And indeed, in this case, it has an impact on the community. Certainly, that is, in fact, true equally as well. So we say then, briefly, that community colleges can be a powerful tool of being a web effect on this state with no time actually involved in it, which means that every community college effectively, if done right, put in place right, can have a tremendous impact on civic engagement and also have a positive impact on students and the communities alike. And so then, that being the case, what are we able to say? We're able to say this. As we think about it very carefully, at St. Petersburg College, we have seven campuses. 7 campuses in one of the most densely populated counties, not only in the state of Florida, but in the United States. That being the case, of our 35,000 students in this case covering Pinellas County, we have 13 deans. Now, listening to me very carefully. Those 13 deans in this case have got a statement of commitment to civic engagement. I know because I'm the so-called civic engagement dean. Of the 13, it's my job to make sure that it's moved forward, but I don't have to make that something that's moving forward because my other 12 colleagues are fundamentally committed to doing that. So it's an important part of our retention plan, which means in this particular case for St. Petersburg College, it is in the retention plan. The deans are held accountable for working it into the overall process of impacting our students. So whether you're the math dean or not, it doesn't matter. You're expected to carry out this particular responsibility. Whether you're humanities dean, it doesn't matter. You're expected to carry out this particular responsibility. If you're in fact a math dean, you're expected to do that because we fundamentally believe one thing I heard the panel say, one can work this into any course and make it an effective part of that course without violating the 60-hour rule. We know the 60-hour rule is not going to change. Don't be asking for that to change. It's not going to change. You got to do what you're going to do in an effective way within those 60 hours. And the effective way is to know that civic engagement, given our democracy, is something that we have got to make first priority, and we as community colleges can make that happen if it is in fact done right. So I simply use St. Petersburg College as an example, although I know our colleagues at TCC and other places are doing it equal as well. But there's a call upon every community college to be doing it and doing it right, and we believe that can have a tremendous impact. But one critical thing is this, okay? It tells me that the whole college has got to develop that concept. So in this case, every dean, in its persistence, progression, and retention plan, clearly has an objective that states that the role of civic engagement is going to be vital in that process. You've got to create those kinds of things in your delivery of the learning outcomes, in your curriculum, that will cause it to happen without violating some state rule about 60 hours or something like that. So we say then it is commitment from the deans that's causing it to happen, because every student at St. Petersburg College is under a dean, which means that invariably if the deans do it right, then all of our students will be impacted in a positive way on the ground. So then we take a look at this. Note this very carefully. Look at all of the subject areas. You can find courses in every subject area where the utilization of true civic engagement or community service can clearly be an effective part of it. So if you look at it very carefully, each of those little marks represents a dean, if you will. The one across the right, this is me right here. The one on the far right-hand side, that's me. All of those courses are courses where, in fact, you're expected to have a fundamental civic engagement experience in what you're in fact doing. So the entire community college can be a powerful tool for doing it. Every county can be impacted because community colleges are actively involved in every county in this state. And by the way, this is not something that will cost you extra money. The quickest way to get in trouble in this state is to say that you need to achieve something by having to have more money. Now, I fundamentally understand you have to see it, and I understand the role of money. What I am saying to you, but if you can get the job done in a way that does not require you to have to go beg for thousands or more dollars, democracy is at stake. And I fundamentally believe in this particular case that community colleges are powerful tools because they're surrounding communities. They can impact communities directly. We're saying that community colleges can be a powerful tool for causing that to happen. Almost through. And if you take a look at it very carefully here, here's Pinellas County. If you look at Pinellas County, again, one of the most densely populated counties in the United States. We've got more people than some states have got right there in that small county. But the reality is, in this particular case, we've got partners throughout Pinellas County. Everywhere you see there's a star, that is a partner that we're working with, allowing for our students to be actively involved in delivering this notion of service learning, delivering this notion of involvement, delivering this notion of community literacy, if you will, as it relates to civic engagement. Whether it is about your civic learning, whether it is about your community volunteering, or whether it is in fact about service learning, all of those can be delivered throughout with all the partners that are actively involved with that. Every community college in this state would fundamentally be able to do the same thing. We're able to impact the entirety of the county by causing that to happen. The 13 deans are responsible for making that happen. And so then I'll close by just simply citing the transition with the piece of one thing that's vitally important in this case. Now, there are a lot of things you can do. There are a lot of partners you can, in fact, work with. There are a lot of ways you can have your students experience the civic engagement experience. But then one way that we have found to be vitally important and has been given a high priority with us is to partner with our schools. And so as we talk about partnering with our schools, we have a commitment to our civic and civic engagement and service learning piece being connected with our schools. And so then that being the case, the middle schools and the elementary schools throughout Pinellas County, we're developing that relationship. We're going to make it even stronger as we move forward. But our students, in delivering this notion of civic engagement, we're committing them to working with elementary students and working with middle school students in this case, being able to impact those students in a positive way. Just reveal one very personal story to you in this particular case. Sawgrass Lake Elementary. One of our students, if you will, is a blind student. He had a traumatic injury, if you will, lost his sight because of it, but in our psychology class, in his civic engagement, service learning experience, he serves as a mentor for students at Sawgrass Lake Elementary School, in this case, creating an atmosphere we believe to positively impact those young students. In this case, providing an opportunity for that student to have that kind of impact. And then, of course, if you take a look at it very carefully, Bonner Elementary School, without question in this case, Orange Grove Elementary School, our students in this case are fundamentally able to do something good. They're able to help, especially our public schools in this case, to be able to move forward with a high level of success, a higher level of effectiveness with their students in this case, where it does not cost us a dime, it does not cost them a dime, for them to be able to be working with students, tutoring students, and mentoring students, if you will, on that level. So in this particular case, every community college in the state, some are doing it, but all of them could be doing this in such a way to impact students, and at the end of the day, allowing our students to understand the importance of civic engagement, because by doing that, we're convinced that it results in a higher success rate for those students. I have seen the data. You don't have to convince me as a dean. If my students are going to be more successful by doing this in my right mind, I will make every effort to cause an environment to occur where they can, in fact, do it. And then, of course, lastly, in this particular case, even in those high-risk communities, if you will, Ridgecrest is in one of the high-risk communities. You may have heard something about some of the schools and some of the difficulties that they're having in this case. But for our students to be able to go and to engage in civic engagement, community service, if you will, service learning, if you, in some cases, if you will, to be actively involved with this particular effort, there's simply no better way for our students to go through the experience of understanding the power of civic engagement in terms of its impact on them, the impact on community, and the impact on the process that they're in fact going through. And so we say that in this case that the 28 community colleges in the state can be powerful tools for causing that to happen. We say in this particular state, every county can be affected if it's done right in this case, and we believe it's something that can be done because you're not hit with the barrier of this so-called budget thing. If you don't have the dollars have been taken away from you, there's no real reason as to why civic engagement should suffer as a result of that. So we cry out to you in this particular case then for those who are supportive of this kind of action, for this notion of community colleges to be powerful engines, not only supporting the public schools, all the other places where they're involved in civic engagement. So we offer that as words of encouragement, and we're going to do everything we can at St. Petersburg College to cause that to happen.
All right, Doug.
No, I don't want to follow that act, right? But I do want to entertain a motion to make Joe Smiley czar of civic engagement in Florida. Can I get the clicker?
Here it is.
Here we go.
Good.
All right, I promise not to be that exciting. I'm well practiced at that. I get the K-12 piece on this, and since Chris and I were so well coordinated, he stepped on some of my lines, so you're going to hear a couple things twice. I apologize for that, but I did want to give you a sense of what we're learning about civic learning in Florida. We've been working on this now, that is implementing the Sandra Day O'Connor Civics Education Act since 2010. So the last 7 years of our collective lives have been devoted day in and day out to trying to figure out how to make this act work in a way that it really contributes to civic knowledge, civic skills, and civic dispositions, the kinds of things you want to come out of a civics education experience. We have two components within the Lou Fry Institute that are working on that. One is the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, which you've already heard referenced today. That does, in fact, work with districts, with schools across the state to provide curricular materials and assessment help for schools and kids. We've got a website, a review website up for students that if you watch them use it during the year, you can understand what it's like to see an entire state cram for an exam as the end of the year approaches. But it's important to understand the other entity that we have is more recent, a partnership for civic learning that involves school districts, FLDOE, and research faculty from major universities across the state who are concerned about civic engagement and want to study it. So we're trying to not only support the implementation, giving teachers what they need, we're trying to study the process as we go so that civic learning in Florida becomes a continuous improvement process. And I can tell you that there is a lot of national interest in what's going on here. What's happening in civic education in Florida is in fact leading the nation. And even Illinois' recent legislation was modeled on what's been done here in Florida. So having said that, let's take a look at outcomes. You've already heard this mentioned. Civics increased from about 61% pass in 2014 up to, it's actually 70% passed this last test administration. And this is touching 200,000 kids a year. So we collectively, the teachers who are doing this, have touched 1 million kids to help them learn more about civics and citizenship since this act has been on the ground. And Liz Smith, sitting in the back over there, is one of our fine civics teachers and worked with us in the Joint Center for a while. And Liz had a pass rate of?
Our school had a pass rate of 94%. Only 3 of my students didn't pass.
Yes, that deserves a hand. That deserves a hand. That's good. That's good. I would point out to you that there are 4 subjects now tested with an end-of-course test: history, civics, biology, and science. And you'll note on this chart that the only subject that's shown year-over-year increases every year since the test was initiated is, in fact, civics. That is, in large part, due to the commitment of civics teachers. It's also due, in part, to the support structures that we and others have built to make civics work, and our commitment to understanding what's going on and making adjustments on the fly to support teachers to give them what they need to help their students be a success. One more point on outcomes. We're not only seeing an absolute increase in test scores, we're seeing a decrease in poor performance, so that the percentage of students in the lowest performing category has decreased by 31% since 2014, and the percentage of students in the highest performing category has increased by 53%. So this whole system is improving. Having said that, let me just make a side observation that this is really driven, in my opinion and the opinion of a lot of others, by the fact that we have an accountable system in civics. That is that we have a test. There was a legislative effort last year to remove all of the EOCs, including civics. That may come back in the legislature in this next session. I would advise you that, based on a decade's worth of experience working with schools in this area, that if that occurs, that'll probably be a major setback to what goes on in certainly in middle schools across Florida. In addition, we talked a little bit about in an earlier session about values. I just mentioned dispositions and engagement. So we're trying to understand what students walk away with. Now, remember, these are middle school students, right? They're 13 years old. But the question is, what do they look like in terms of their civic values and engagement when they leave 7th grade? So we're trying to monitor their civic participation, their sense of efficacy, that is, can I make a difference? Can I actually do something in my community? What about tolerance? How tolerant of different points of view, different people are you? How aware of current events are you? What about this whole fake news business? Media, the question of media literacy has become terribly important, so we're trying to monitor that. The partnership is really working to try to figure out what drives this, how we can improve not only test scores, that is, do you know what the 3 branches are, do you know how a bill becomes a law, but also how we can improve the sense of citizenship, the ownership of community, the kind of democratic values that we would like to see students develop in K-20. I'll take one example. I know I only have 3 or 4 more minutes here. Well, how do I get that? Hang on. We'll get there. I threw Bob a curveball is the reason this happened.
So,
No, this one.
let's see, this may be, this one doesn't have it.
No, it's in a PDF, remember?
Yeah, and I think it's in, I had to create a separate one to
Yeah.
put it in. Yeah.
Oh,
There
sorry.
it is.
Okay.
That's all right, that's all right.
Okay.
There it is.
All right, this may be a little hard for you to read, and I apologize for that. But this is based on survey data with about 7,000 kids over the last 2 or 3 years. And we wanted to understand not only how much kids are participating as they're leaving middle school civics, but we wanted to understand how they're getting taught in the classroom and what the relationship is between how they're getting taught and what they're leaving with. So we were actually pretty pleased to learn that most of these kids tell us they're engaged in some way or another. For example, about 85% of them say that they regularly help their neighbors. They help out at school. About 3/4 are telling us that they've done something this year to help their city or their state a better place to live. About 2/3 say they help out at their church or their synagogue or other place of worship. About 65% of these kids, as opposed to all the numbers you've heard about the Florida population, about 65% of these kids said that they did something they volunteered for something over the course of the year. Almost 2/3 of them are mentoring, and about over half of them are serving they're in some kind of group and perhaps even serving as a leader. So how are teachers teaching them? We know from a decade's, almost 20 years worth of research now, that certain things work in civics classrooms to help produce the kind of outcomes that we want in terms of civic knowledge, civic skills, and dispositions. Those are generally active instructional, highly engaged instructional practices. Discussing current events, simulations, computer-based simulations, debates, participating in community service projects, having visitors come in from the community and participating in things like mock trials or mock legislatures. And what we're finding is that by and large, on virtually everything but mock trials that we've tested, a majority of students are telling us that they're experiencing that in their classrooms. We're also doing surveys of teachers, and so these results line up pretty closely with what teachers tell us they're trying to do in the classroom. So what difference does it make? If you look at this little chart down on the lower left, what we find is that when students experience all of those instructional methods over the course of the year, the likelihood of their being highly engaged drops dramatically. So teachers can make a real difference in the outcomes that their students experience. And we went one step further and tried to take a look at what the relative contribution of each of those instructional strategies is. And what we found was that participating, actually getting out and doing the kinds of things that Dee Dee has college students doing, that is participating in a service learning project, a community project, learning by experience, the kind of thing that Bob Graham advocates on a daily basis, really does have a pretty dramatic impact on student engagement. But in fact, all of these things do. So getting somebody to come in who's a real role model makes a difference in what kids walk away with. Participating in a mock trial makes a difference. Discussing community current events makes a positive difference. So teachers, it's critical to have the highest quality teachers we can in the classroom, because what this tells you is that they're making a difference in what those kids walk away with on a daily basis. So there's lots of good news about what's going on in civics, K-20 civics here in Florida. There are some challenges. The accountability was located in middle school. We tried originally to build an accountability system for elementary, middle, and high school, and the legislature said, no, I don't think so. So we gave up on elementary and high school and went with middle school. What that means is that there's the challenge of actually getting civics taught in elementary school, even though the law was written to be completely integrated, so that there's a requirement that civics content be integrated at every grade level with reading and literature from kindergarten through 12th grade. But because there's not an accountability system, that's a slow grind to get that done. We're making some progress. We have lots of lessons out there. We work with teachers. We're making some progress. But that's a challenge, and it's a challenge in high school as well. We are doing some work with high school American government, bringing in some new curricular materials, problem-based learning strategies developed in Seattle at the University of Washington, the Seattle School District, that we'll have ready to go out next year. And I think those will make a real contribution, not only to high school American government, but to meeting the secondary civic literacy admission requirement. I would just mention one more challenge, and you know this, but I need to say it. That is that test scores are not evenly distributed across population groups. Not everybody gets the same quality of education. Not everybody has the same outcome. Those kids who are living in a less than great economic status do worse. They don't get as much. Minority kids are not getting as much. And we need to invest more. We've been doing some work in North Florida with some poor rural schools with pretty remarkable results, but it's expensive, and it requires a commitment of resources, time, and energy to make that happen. So the good news is Florida's leading the nation in K-20 or K-12 civics education. other states are modeling after what we're doing here. The less than good news is there are lots of challenges left, and we have to stay the course. We can't back away from the idea that we have to learn how to help students learn about civics. Thank you very much.